everyone, and welcome to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. On today's show, we're focusing on financial advice for singles. Did you know that solo living is the new norm in Canada? And that's according to data from the latest census, which was conducted back in 2021. So, for our viewers who are living single, or those with friends who are living single, you are aware that those going solo face several financial challenges that can impact their financial well-being. And it seems that when it comes to finances, single people can't seem to get a break. Whether there's taxes, housing, retirement, something as simple as a hotel room as well. So if you can relate and are ready to take control of your finances and build a secure financial future, my guest today has some great advice for you. We have Renée Sylvestre-Williams as an award-winning journalist, a finance content strategist, and a professional speaker. And her new book, The Singles Tax, No-Nonsense Financial Advice for Solo Earners, is out this month. Renée, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Before we get into sort of the details about what we're going to talk about today and about your new book, can you share a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so like you said, I am a financial journalist. I have been covering money and business for about 15 years. I started the newsletter, The Budget, September of 2020, when all of us had a lot of time on our hands. And that is kind of where the book came from. I cover everything from credit cards all the way to like economic policies.
So let's get into this new book. So it's called The Singles Tax, No-Nonsense Financial Advice for Solo Earners. So what inspired you to actually write this book?
Okay, so it was 2020. We knew what was going on at the time. There was the pandemic. I was freelancing full time, so I had some time on my hands. And you know, when you have time on your hands, you got to think. And obviously I was, was thinking about money. And I actually kind of started pitching stories about how, being single affects your finances and what's going on. It was a bit of a pandemic slant to it. Didn't get a lot of uptick on it. I did sell a few stories. And I realized I had so many questions about so many topics that all of us think about. And I had nowhere to put them. So I started a newsletter. Because I figured, listen, if I have all of these questions, other people probably have these questions too, right? So it first kind of started out with your basic budgeting, planning for retirement, but it has expanded out into community and social policy and how being single either affects your planning or how external factors affect you when you're single.
And I love that. So because as I mentioned before, I mean, solo living seems to be a new norm in our country. The latest census in 2021 said that 4.4 million people, or roughly about 15% of our total population, are reporting that they're living by themselves, which is apparently the highest share on record, which I wasn't aware of. And of course, the data also reveals that there are nearly 15 million households in Canada, of which 3 out of 10 of those are one-person households. So it's making it the most common type of living arrangement in our country. Now, this is, of course, ahead of married couples that maybe don't have children or couples that do have children. And then, of course, then between 2016 and 2021, the number of one-person households increased by a little over 6%. And that's a significant increase in a short period of time. Are there reasons behind this, do you think?
Well, there are your standard reasons. There are people who just choose to be single for whatever reason that works for them. Maybe they're focusing on something else at the time. It could be just a choice for them. You have people who are coming out of relationships, and maybe when the census came around, and we've got a new census happening soon, so I'm really interested in seeing that if the numbers grew since then. But when the census came around, they might have just come out of a relationship, a separation, a divorce. They may have been widowed within that time, of course. So there's just so many reasons. They may have just moved to the country. There's just so many reasons for people being single. But it is interesting that you brought up that it is the new norm. And I think part of it too is people are taking the time to understand who they are as an individual, right? And then, kind of like once they're working on themselves, they're trying to understand who they are, and then they're bringing that into a relationship. So I think it's kind of a combination of a lot of factors.
And is there any sort of correlation as well with maybe those people that are maybe, like you mentioned, they're staying single longer, but it's because they're focusing on themselves, maybe education, maybe career, something like that?
Yes, I would say that too. So education, career, and also sort of financial stability, right? Because there's a bit of this kind of underlying desire to be financially stable before, you partner up. Well, get married, have children, maybe buy a house, right? And I think just because of sort of the economic environment that we are in right now, I think that does contribute to people staying single a little longer, right? Because they're
Mhm.
kind of trying to work their way to that sort of financial stability, which is
Right,
taking a little
right.
longer than previous generations.
Sure, absolutely. So, regardless of the reason, sort of why someone is currently single or chooses to be single, single people seem to have other maybe different concerns that than couples might have.
Mhm.
What are some of the things that single people maybe are a little bit more worried about?
Well, I think it all depends on your situation, but as I sort of addressed in the book, I think we all have the concerns, but I think some of them weigh a little more in single people. So, we're looking at affordability, right? Housing affordability, that's the big issue of our times right now. And when I say housing affordability, I don't just mean getting a mortgage. I also mean being able to afford rent, especially in one of the big Canadian cities where yes, rent has dropped recently, but it is still like Toronto and Vancouver. We're looking at $2,000 for a one-bedroom apartment, right? Anywhere between 18 and $2,000 for a one-bedroom apartment. And when you like, that's what? $24,000 a year in rent. And if you look at sort of the average to median income, which is between $59,000 to $74,000, depending if you're looking at the average and the median, that is a significant chunk of change out of your net income, not your gross income. So it's things like that. And, the simple answer is usually like, well, get a roommate. Okay, but not everybody wants to live with a roommate, especially past a certain age. So there's things like that. And then there's like, okay, well, I have one income. What happens if I get laid off? Because layoffs are happening currently. We all know, we've been reading the news. How do I look at this money and make it and have enough money to fill every pot that I'm supposed to fill? I'm supposed to save for an emergency fund. I am supposed to pay rent or mortgage. I am supposed to buy food, and food is supposed to be going up another 4 to 6% this year. And somewhere in there, say for retirement with one income. Now, if you make a significant amount of money, high six figures, you might have better luck managing all of that, but not everybody makes six figures. And then, of course, there's the big one as we all get older. How am I going to pay to age well? And what does that look like?
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of different things that, when you're in that sort of single lifestyle, um, you do have more of the financial load is
Mhm.
on just you.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so making those decisions, making those plans, it does absolutely look differently than if you were, um, you know, in a couple or something like that. So
Mhm.
um, there are other sort of key concerns that other singles maybe face. Some people say that single people are punished simply for being single. You can't get a break from tax filing to even hotel rooms. Can you
Mhm.
elaborate a little bit about that?
I will say that it's not deliberate. Now, we do live in a society where coupling up is encouraged. I mean, we're recording this in January and we just came out of the Hallmark Christmas story season, right? And we're heading into Valentine's Day, right? So, we're in that 1 month between like 2 months that is, talk about coupling up and all of that kind of thing. But the systems benefit couples a lot. Like, so for example, the tax system, we all file individually. That's how our tax system works. But the tax system does benefit couples, right?
Mhm.
Like especially post-retirement, there's income splitting there, which can reduce the higher earners income, right? So you get that lovely tax break. If you are a high earning single person, you don't get that tax break, right? You just have to make sure you maximize all your deductions and tax credits and all of those things, maybe up your charitable donations and all of that, but you're still spending money to get those credits. So it's things like that. And then, there's sort of the fundamental differences. Like, it is easier to get a mortgage if you have a bigger income. You have a bigger income if you have two people working. Right? It's probably easier to qualify for a mortgage with that kind of thing. Right. And then, you addressed travel. Now, hotels in Canada are not supposed to charge a single supplement. So if you are being charged a single supplement, apart, and this is outside of just paying for the cost of the whole hotel room yourself, you should not be charged. Where the single supplement tends to kick in is in things like tours and group tours and cruises and all of those things. Now, as I do also address in the book, there are tours, tour groups and cruises that actually do not have the single supplements. Right, like deliberately. And they have rooms that actually cater to single people. Like a couple years ago, two other friends and I went to a resort during the holidays, and it was three of us, right? So awkward pairing. We're like, okay, are we going to pull a bunk bed into the hotel room? Didn't happen. Two of us shared a room, right? Two queen size beds. And there was a room specifically for single people, slightly smaller, one bed, right? And we saw it. It was really cute. And that resort had that. And even earlier than that, I went to New York because I had some holiday days to burn. And the hotel that I stayed at actually had a room for a single person. Really nice, small, compact, had everything you needed, and was priced for a single person. Right. So there are options out there. And then, of course, there is the classic, like travel in the off season. If you don't have kids and you don't have a partner, super easy to do. But, if you have you're single and you have children, obviously a little harder to do. So there are workarounds that don't make you feel less than.
Yeah. I love that. So just with a couple of minutes that we have left in this first segment, let's talk about spending and saving. I think you have some really good actionable tips. So can you sort of start off with day-to-day spending tips?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say, I'll throw the B word in there, budget, not because it's going, it's just so you know where your dollars are going. Right? That's a really good one. Check for all of those ghost subscriptions that you are paying for and you're not using. Like, is there a streaming service that you're paying for and you're not using? Get rid of it. That kind of thing. Food wise, I think you need to look at how you buy food and how you spend food and how you're spending your money on food. Some of the suggestions that I have is you partner up with friends and do a Costco run. I did that this past weekend. A friend of mine has a Costco membership. We went there. I picked up my laundry detergent and a few other things. It was great. She used her card. I paid for it. It was excellent. Those kinds of partnerships. And part of being single is making sure you have that community around you. So you have a friend that you can go to Costco with.
Yes, absolutely. And it's like you mentioned in your book, single people are not lonely and depressed all the time. And, you have relationships as well. And so absolutely building on those relationships, I think, is really important. And as we head into this next segment, we're going to talk about tapping into the other professionals that can help us in these goals. We're going to talk about setting up a will and estate planning, which is maybe something that single people haven't thought of. And so Renee's going to have some really great advice for us when Money Matters returns after the break. Welcome back to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. My guest today is Renée Sylvestre-Williams, award-winning journalist, finance content strategist, and professional speaker. And she's also the author of the book, The Singles Tax, No Nonsense Financial Advice for Solo Earners. Now, going it alone in life may have its challenges sometimes, but as you've been hearing, it does not mean that you can't build a secure financial future. And with the right financial plan, you can build and achieve that retirement, or maybe other financial goals that you might have. And that can also include financial security. Now, to help us in making those plans, Renée, you mentioned in your book that it's important that we can delegate to a team to help us, reaching out to other professionals. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I make the case that, so listen, you may be the most organized person in the world and you might have a type A personality, that's me right there. But you can't do everything. You cannot do everything. So having a team, I think, really, really helps for multiple reasons. One, you can tap into their expertise that you may or may not have. And two, it can reduce anxiety, including financial anxiety. So some of the people that I suggest, you don't have to do this, but I suggest you have is an accountant. Even if you file your own taxes, it's always good to have kind of an accountant just in case something happens. Like maybe you get an inheritance, maybe you get a bonus from work, that kind of thing. Maybe your salary increases. What do you do with that? How do you plan for your goals? An advisor and financial planner that can help you lay out both a day-to-day, your short-term, medium-term, and long-term financial goals. I also talk about having the number of an employment lawyer. Like we referred earlier, layoffs are happening, are you getting enough severance? What happens here? Like, what is this legal document? Right? That kind of thing. Like, for example, more than a decade ago, I got laid off. There was a big group layoff and they offered me 2 weeks because I was there for less than a year. And I got the number of an employment lawyer and I got 12 weeks instead. A huge difference. It's 10 extra weeks. That's a lot more breathing room. I also suggested in the book that you talk to somebody who knows their insurance, like an insurance agent or an insurance advisor, because, they can help you with home insurance, automobile insurance, critical and disability insurance, especially if you're self-employed, right? Because if something happens to you, you want to still have some income coming in, right? And also life insurance, right? Now, people might think, well, you're single, you don't have kids. Do you really need life insurance? I think the answer is it depends. You may not have kids, but you could be supporting your parents. You could be supporting somebody else. You could have pets, like have some life insurance there, right? So they are not left hanging. Those are just some of the people. And again, you're not like paying for them. You reach out to them when you need them and then you pay for their services.
Right. So I call these people sort of my toolbox, but I like that you call it your team, where you take out the person that you need to help you with that one problem. And it's the people that have the expertise of the things that you're not fully educated in. And so I agree with you completely. To have those other professionals behind you is really important. Now, what do you say to those people who might say, I don't earn enough income, I don't have enough assets to talk to a financial planner? What would you say to them?
There's no such thing as not having enough assets for a financial planner. Like, again, you do not need to be rich to have a financial plan. A plan is a plan. It is there to get you where you would like to go. And it gives you like that roadmap to get there, right? People think that you need to have a ton of money to have an advisor and a financial planner. But like a planner is that ideally unbiased third party, right? Who will look at your income, look at your spending and go, okay, well, what about this, and this? Because for all of us, there's a lot of emotions tied up with money and our money and how we earn it and how we spend it, right? So it is a little hard to take that step back and look at our spending and our plan in a very unbiased way. And that planner can help you do that. And that's all it is. Now, what happens after that is, are you going to follow the plan or not? Right? But that's all that a planner does, right? Now, there are for-fee planners and advisors, which could be that someone you pay, which could be your best option. You pay that fee, right? They sit down with you, right? It's very collaborative. They do that plan for you, right? And that is it. It's just a roadmap that you could choose to follow.
And part of that plan is planning for the future, which should including single people, having a will and estate planning. Because like you mentioned, everyone has a legacy.
Yep.
I think that they're going to leave behind, right?
Yeah.
So why is estate planning important for single people as well?
Right. So let's just take the will out of that. So the estate plan is what happens to you while you're still here. right? I'm going to fold in POAs for health and property as well in there because you are around, right? And the thing with having an estate plan, it outlines your wishes while you're here, and it gives the executor or the POA a roadmap. I keep using that word of what you want to happen to you if you are unfortunately physically or mentally incapacitated. Right? Even if you're not, but even if you're just older, right? So you can put everything in there, like where do you want to live? Like what long-term care home do you want? I have spoken to people who in their estate plan, they're like, I want to be in this care home and I want to have a west-facing window. I think I can't remember. I think one point in time, they're like, I want my hair done once a month, that kind of thing, right? You can get really, really specific about it, right? And and folding in POA and all of that kind of thing, you can fold in your health requirements in there, how you want to be treated medically, that kind of thing. And I think it's also sort of really, really important, and I'm going to fold the will back in here, is especially if you are a member of the LGBTQIA community, right? It ensures that you live out your life and then post death as your chosen identity, right? If you have the will and you have the estate plan there, and let's say you do not have the best relationship with biological family members, right? You have your instructions there. So you are not dead named, right? You, even though you have died, you are not celebrated in a way that doesn't feel right for you. Right? That kind of thing. Your assets are given to the people and or associations that you want to, because about half of Canadians don't have a will. And what happens is if you don't have a will, it can get really messy, especially if there are things like, a second property and assets and businesses and that kind of thing. But what happens is when you die intestate, the provincial guidelines are the ones that decide how your assets are divided. So like I said, if you do not have a good relationship with your biological family members, you could end up with your assets going to them because you did not put that down.
Yeah. Yeah. So important to think about these things that, maybe hasn't crossed anyone's mind because we're living our lives day to day. And sometimes we don't want to think about what the future might hold. So I absolutely agree that having those plans in place is really, really important. Now, maybe for those people who are currently living the single life, at some point, maybe in the future, they may choose to cohabitate with someone.
Yeah.
So what are some ways that person can things they can do to protect their financial well-being moving into the future if that were to happen?
A cohabitation agreement. A cohabitation agreement, especially if you are coming into this relationship with property. Right? That's one of the first things. So for example, when I bought my place here 15, 16 years ago, I was walking back from work one day and I was talking to my accountant, and we were just chatting, and I can't remember how we got into the topic of my condo, but he's like, Renée, if you ever move somebody in or if you ever get into a relationship, make sure you have a cohabitation agreement. And this was before I started writing about money. So I'm like, what is that? Because nobody's ever talked to me about it. And it turns out if you have a cohabitation agreement, right, there is a lower chance that you will not have to sell your home, right? Because the other person makes a claim on it. Right? It becomes your property. Now, if you can do that, there's also marriage agreements. People call them prenups, but technically we don't have prenups in Canada. They're marriage contracts. That's what they're called, right? Where you discuss what assets are coming in, shared assets, is the house that you're bringing in, is that going to be a shared asset? Probably not. But if the two or you pool your resources and buy a home, then yes, that becomes a marital home. What happens to that? And of course, if down the line, if you have children, you can have conversations about how the children will be raised, if either of you are religious or not, what schools you want to go to, that kind of thing. So, it's all paperwork. And I know people say paperwork is not romantic. Going back to the wills, like I think people don't like to make wills because they don't like to think about death. And you're not going to make a will and drop dead. Trust me. You're more likely to drop dead without a will. And the same thing with a cohabitation agreement or a marriage contract or anything like that. All right. People say it's not romantic, but you know what it is? It prevents a lot of discord later on in case it does not work out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And this cohabitation agreement is something that I really am not familiar with. So absolutely, if it's a way that you can protect yourself moving into the future, then having that additional plan in place, there's nothing wrong with that. So with the couple of minutes that we have left, do you have any sort of final thoughts, final advice for our single viewers?
Yes, and this one, I mean, we talked a lot about sort of the financial planning, and that is extremely important, and I encourage that. But I think what we haven't really touched on is how important it is for everybody, but especially for single people, to try and build a really strong community around you. You know, I've talked about sort of concentric circles of friends where, you know, your closest friends, and then, you know, the people and your outer friends, like people you see once a year, that kind of thing, or your social media friends. But it's so important to have a community around you. Like single people, according to one of the studies that I referenced in my book, are one of the happier demographics, which is great. But having a community around you, especially as you get older, I think is not only important for, you know, your financial well-being, because you can pool your resources, but your emotional well-being. Like, for example, my neighbor, she's away this weekend helping her dad, and I'm going to go feed her cat. Right? Because, you know, we're friends. She introduced herself when she moved in. We're friends. We've had drinks a few times. And, you know, the key is downstairs. I'm going to go grab the key, go feed the cat, pet the cat, make sure the cat's not lonely. But community is really important as well, especially when you're single.
Absolutely. And there's so much more that we could talk about, Renée, and I really appreciate you being here. Most importantly, how can people go and buy your book?
The book is available at most bookstores across Canada. There is an ebook as well that you can buy. The audiobook comes out in February. And in all honesty, if the book is not in your budget right now, it is in the library.
I love it. Thank you so much, Renée, for being here, sharing all of your great advice. And I really want to thank you, our viewers, for watching. Until next time, I'm Shannon Jackson.